All right, so you ready to talk Avalanche?
I am ready to talk
Okay,
Avalanche.
so I want to start by talking about the Avalanche in terms of what the hell is the Avalanche? Because it was funny because one of the things that I like about working with you is it's always a surprise in terms of, well, what exactly am I doing? It's like, well, there's this new thing we're doing, and then there's this other thing that we already knew we were doing, but now it has a name. And so I just remember seeing Avalanche, and it was like, well, at the Avalanche, we'll handle this. So that can wait till after Avalanche. And after about 5 mentions of Avalanche, I said, what is Avalanche? And you're like, oh, well, it was mentioned a while ago. It's the big company meeting. And so that was my introduction to Avalanche was, that meeting that we're doing, it's now called the thing because it's, I guess, an avalanche of ideas.
Yeah, well, there was 2 things. It was an avalanche of ideas for sure. Like there's a lot to process there. But also the whole metaphor that we've used many times with the snowball rolling downhill, right? And I think we're preparing for the avalanche in a lot of ways. I mean, yeah, there's an avalanche of stuff to process. But I think we've said over and over that 2018 is kind of our year, and that 2017, it's not that 2017 is going to be a shit year, and we're not even, like, who cares about 2017? We're already on to 18. But I think it's really practical to say, okay, well, 2018 is what we're preparing for, so how do we lay that groundwork in 2017?
Right, I see 2017 as, it's going to be an awesome year in and of itself, but let's get all the systems go. It's a little bit like if you were gonna have a fast train or something, like you need to clear the tracks, like let's clear the tracks, let's make sure everything's optimized, all the wheel bearings are lubricated, and just get our stuff together as much as humanly possible so that we can go as fast. That's what I see 2017.
Right.
It's like an optimized version of sweeping the floor.
Yes, it's building all the systems so that, I mean, there's a lot of ambition in the list for sure, but there's nothing crazy. There's nothing like totally like...
And that was my favorite part of it was, you've conditioned the company such that that Amy, mainly Amy, I'm thinking of Amy, looked at the list and after you were done, she kind of sat back and was like, her body language is kind of like, well, I'm not impressed. Like it was just a little bit of, she didn't say that, but it was like, well, I thought it was going to be a lot crazier. Like I'm not totally overwhelmed right now.
Well, and that's good. And it's not like there weren't crazy ideas, but they went into a different pile. Right? Like, okay, well, that's a 2018 pile or a later pile or whatever. The 2017 can be crazy, but not nuts, right? It could be like, okay, well, that's a lot, but everything threaded together. And I think that if we do that well, then it will invite natural other opportunities because we're finally at the scale of business and we've been working for many years to accomplish this, but we have pieces to play with now. So before, when we went to masterminds, for example, we would be able to put 2 and 2 together for somebody else. Right? But now when we get to put 2 and 2 together and we actually have those pieces, then we get to experience that payoff. And that's an exciting place to be. And so we really need to focus on building that possibility because what's the worst thing that can happen? We don't prepare for 2018. All the opportunities we've been waiting for come our way and we can't handle them. Right?
Well, I'd like to call Dave right now and see if that is indeed the worst thing that can happen, because I would wager that is not the worst thing that can happen.
Okay, it's not the worst thing that can happen, no. But for us, that would be disappointing, right? Because we really have worked hard to invite a lot of these opportunities. We don't believe in luck, but we believe you can make your own, and that we're preparing for that. But if we don't build those systems, then we're not going to be able to handle the opportunities that naturally come our way.
Right.
And we're already seeing that early this year. I mean, at the time of this recording, we're barely into January.
Very messy, but in a way that I find very satisfying.
Yeah.
Like every time we uncover something, and I don't want to go into this whole thing, but we have a mess. We have a mess to clean up, and I enjoy it. Like I don't enjoy that it's there. My wife definitely doesn't enjoy it, but I find myself going, this is good because this is forcing us to kind of grow up and put on the big boy pants and actually treat ourselves like a real business. I mean, just before we started recording, we were talking about something that we actually won't be discussing. That'll be like down the road. And I'm like, well, we got to make an internal business case for that. Now you need to, in sort of practical terms, convince the company and convince the CFO.
Right.
Like we got to make a case for that. Like making an internal business case is a smart thing, but that's just one of the things that we're learning to do with things like the Avalanche.
Right. So we have to ask ourselves better questions, and we have to know, we don't just have to have the answer, we have to know what our most desired outcome is. What answer are we expecting? What answer is practical? Because there's also the dreaming thing, right? Which is the joke.
Do you think that in these recordings that I need to cover the logo of whatever company I may or may not be drinking their beverage?
Probably a good idea. So. It's like in Modern Family where they cover the apple.
Yeah.
You're like, I have no idea what kind of computer that is. I think keeping an eye on just tweaking all of that is important. And I think that our company got to the size this year where we wanted to capitalize on that and have everybody in one place at one time and talk. And the Avalanche was really, really fun for that. Do we want to talk a little bit about the origin of that? Like why we actually, because we weren't actually like, hey, let's have a company meeting. That's what we should do.
In brief, because it's a long story in itself, but the bottom line is that we had booked a hotel room for an event that we weren't able to make happen.
Yeah.
And we were already on the hook for it. Like we'd already committed, we already put down a deposit. And then through a lot of stuff that I won't go into a lot of detail, like basically the argument was, well, let's use it and fly everybody in. And so
okay, this is where the slightly
you got to add the little bit of dip. Yeah.
Well, because it's just good. So the reason was we had we had something that we were going to do in January, which meant that we had a little thing that we were going to do in November. And so when the thing in January didn't happen, it meant that this other thing just totally wasn't going to happen. And like you said, we already paid for the room. So the big question was, okay, we have this thing, do we take loss or do we spend even more money? Because now we still have to pay for the room and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be clear, I think we ended up spending like 3 times as much money.
Right.
It wasn't like, let's spend another $50.
Right, because we were going to videotape it. And we had
to fly in. As far as airline tickets and hotel rooms at the company, well, of course, the hotel rooms were their own thing because we had reserved a block and we were on, but we had to get Clark and Tammy. Audra drove, but she needed a hotel room. Dave, obviously. Who else flew in? Christine had to fly in.
Yeah, she had to
Amy
fly
was
in.
here. You were here. I was here. Robin was here. And hopefully I'm not forgetting everybody now that I've listed everybody.
No, well, I think you did. But and then regardless, like that was a big expense. But we had to look at it practically and say, would we pay to go experience this somewhere else? Like, we'll talk about it when we get into that goal, but the idea is we need to pay for education. We need to pay for experiences. We need to pay for making ourselves smarter, faster. So if we would pay externally to do this, why not pay internally and just invest in our team, invest in our ideas, and bring everybody there and talk it out? And I think there was tremendous value in that. And I was really excited. A couple weeks ahead of time, I did the whole PowerPoint and like I broke out a little bit here because like I just wanted it to be awesome, and I really feel it was. I feel like it wasn't too crazy, and there's a lot of rah, we can do this. So do we want to just talk about what the goals are and then hit them one by one?
Yeah, you can run through the goals. The one point that I would add about all that is that this was the first time, because I think that there's a supposition there that the viewer might not know here, and that's that the Avalanche happened right after a period of kind of bang expansion at Sterling and Stone. We added Clark and Tammy in short order next to each other. My wife Robin joined the team as our director of operations and now CFO, and I think those were the 3 newest people. I mean Heather, but Heather didn't fly in. But they were new to the company, and so the idea of physically co-locating everybody added that extra energy that we don't have when we're communicating.
And needed. Like everybody, I think we felt like a team. We felt like a family. Mm-hmm. And I think you can do bigger things when you have, when you're gelled like that. I mean, Dave didn't want to be left out. That was so awesome because I just assumed he wasn't coming.
Right, like, to the point that we didn't even really invite him.
Right, didn't invite him. I was telling him about it. And he said, so wait, who's going? And well, of course you and Amy, of course, Christine, of course. Well, Audra's driving down, and then there's Clark, and then there's Tammy. So most everyone but me. Well, yes.
And
I
Dave's a partner in the company.
Yeah, but he's always rejected
Right,
us.
he's never wanted to do it.
So yeah, him coming, I think, was really good.
And that's a big deal. Like, to anybody who's new to us might not understand that getting Dave on a plane, getting Dave to go anywhere is hard. But he would grudgingly get into a car and drive and take 2 stops at hotels along the way because it's far.
Because he won't drive at night.
Yeah, because he's down in Florida and he won't drive at night, and so he's got to come all the way up and across the Gulf and down into Texas. And it was just so. In addition to not wanting to be away from home, he was like, it was a week and a half endeavor.
Yeah.
And so when it's like, oh, you can get on a plane and be there in 2 hours, and he was willing to do that. It like, and there are other things that he's going to come in for this year that he wouldn't have come in for. He's like, oh, okay, I can fly. That's not that big a deal.
You know, one thing that's worth mentioning too about the Avalanche was the red and black notebooks.
Yeah.
Right. You want to talk about that at all? Because it is kind of like, it's reflective of where our relationship is too.
It was a fantastic idea. I actually didn't use either of mine. So okay. But basically, but other people did, like, extensively. And this was your idea, and it was a really good one because you're overwhelming to work with sometimes. And it's just like, oh, okay, well, look at all this stuff, and okay, how are we gonna make that work? But we wanted to have day one be, okay, this is rah-rah. This is like no objections allowed. On day two, we can worry about logistics, but day one is just...
It's like improv, right? We start with a yes, and then the next day we can say no as often as we want. Right. Like, but if you have those no impulses on day one, then put them in your book.
The black notebook. So the idea was use the red for the positive or just general notes.
Yeah, so it's basically, we had one notebook that was for one and the other one. And
Dave basically took the red one and said, won't be needing this.
Right.
But interestingly, when we finally got to the day two, Dave was like, well, I had one, and he was like, okay, what else? And that was it.
Yeah, he didn't have any. Well, I don't think really we had so little on day two. There wasn't stuff to reject. There was stuff to process and figure out. And, it's like, it's a puzzle. Like, how do we fit everything into the year? And, like you had to tell Christine, please don't use this as your to-do list because it's not what it is. It's a very big picture that we're going to be constantly painting. But it was really nice to have everybody together and kind of go through that presentation. So let's see if I can do this off the top of my head.
Yeah, so why don't you run through those and then we'll go into them in the subsequent episodes.
All right, so let's see if I can get them and in order. One is blow up the Sterling and Stone brand. That one's easy. Number 2 is scale our fiction, also easy. 3 is create silo products and
micro businesses.
4 is complete phase 2 staffing and systems. 5 is blow up Story Shop and prepare for like exponential growth there. 6 is invest in experiential education. 7 is develop our our speaking and consulting careers. 8 is blow up the or launch the Storyseller's Apprentice course, make it the best course in the publishing industry.
The good news is that I got 2 left in my mind and you haven't mentioned them yet, so we got them all mentally at least.
That's awesome. Really improve and enhance the Stone Table Mastermind. And 10 is the Monarch, which
I can't wait to get to the Monarch goal because Christine was asking me about the Monarch in yesterday's meeting. And I said, okay, I think it's a lot simpler than you think it is.
It's so simple. Like,
she was like, are you sure? And I said, no, I think it's just, I don't want to give a spoiler, but a website that works, like, just to be clear.
Right. That is kind of a spoiler, but yeah, so it's a nice, long, ambitious list, but also nothing crazy there. It's all stuff that kind of we have to do if we want to wear our big boy pants and be a big company and scale and capitalize on the opportunities that are coming our way in 2018.
I think goal number 11 should be allow for new businesses that Sean brings back and hands to us and says, this is 11, 12, and 13.
Okay, that's fair.
All right. So we'll go into the next goal on the next one.
Sounds perfect.